I am sure that each of you, without exception, knew at least one child in elementary school who was very different from the others. Maybe he was unbearably irritating. Maybe he was that one child who endlessly chewed pencils and made strange noises. Or maybe he was the one who constantly caused trouble. His report card was covered with teacher remarks, written in red ink. But the one I want to tell you about was not an ordinary strange child. Dor was different. Yes, Dor, that's what his name was. It wasn't a nickname. The name was on official documents, on his report card, on his student ID. I don't remember his last name very well. Something extremely ordinary, like Smith or Jackson. However, it's not surprising that this surname slipped my mind. It was hardly ever used, because everyone knew who was being talked about. It was enough to say Dor. He always wore a plaid shirt and trousers with a belt. The clothes seemed too large for him, and even as he grew, they remained overly loose. His eyes were small and, most surprisingly, perfectly round. He looked like a puppet from a children's theater. His face was always smeared with some cream or moisturizer. It shone noticeably, and his ears seemed too straight and flat. He was short, much shorter than the other kids in the class, and wore his light hair in a bowl cut. My friends Martin and Luke assumed he was Swedish or Norwegian because the name sounded Scandinavian. Besides, he spoke with some strange accent. When he was called to answer or read aloud, he pronounced every word very slowly and clearly, to the point of exaggeration. He pushed his lower jaw forward in a strange way. I remembered this particularly well. It gave him a look, to put it mildly, of being mentally challenged. But aside from this speech habit, nothing else suggested that. Quite the opposite. He received only excellent grades and, where possible, excellent plus. Gradually, he became the class nerd, the one on whose shoulders fell the duty of doing homework for others. He never refused anyone. It seemed to me that he didn't even know how to say no. He simply fulfilled all requests and orders. And although he worked like a machine, even in cases when almost the entire class owed him for perfectly completed assignments, done with inhuman punctuality and precision, he showed no signs of fatigue. Remembering him, I can hardly recall Dor ever showing any emotions. He seemed empty inside. I don't know how else to explain it. Something resembling autism. He spoke only when it was absolutely necessary. Even when I had to work with him on a group project, he spoke extremely sparingly and strictly to the point. He did everything without emotion, with the diligence of an experienced accountant. He was never late and never sick. I had the impression that all illnesses, even chickenpox and other common childhood ailments, bypassed him. In gym class, despite his unremarkable and wooden posture, he participated diligently and somehow always did fairly well in sword games and other exercises. I also don't remember him ever sweating. While we stuffed wet t-shirts into our bags, he neatly folded his clean, as if just washed clothes, into a perfect square. It would seem that, with his strange behavior, he should have attracted the attention of school bullies, who wouldn't have missed the chance to mock such a standout, eccentric, and obvious target. But his difference was so frighteningly special that nothing like that ever happened only once, in 5th grade. Some new hot-headed student from the older grades provoked him in the hallway. And to everyone's surprise, the small boy, resembling a scarecrow, with that bowl cut and baggy clothes, said something to the bully that made him suddenly step back and leave, clearly flustered. He never tried to bother Dor again, and didn't want to talk about that incident. Maybe he's some kind of robot, joked Luke. Come on, I replied. Dor is a robot, look at how he walks, he whispered to me as Dor appeared in the hallway. Indeed, he walked stiffly and unnaturally. A robot. Exactly. Once, in 6th grade at the end of the school year, when everyone was clearly excited about the upcoming summer holidays, Tor approached me. This surprised me because he had never started a conversation on his own before. His round eyes stared at me like two cameras, examining carefully, as if I were some newly discovered species of exotic reptile. Excuse me, he began, as always slowly, clearly, and with an accent. What? I asked. I won't be at school tomorrow. I'm going with my parents to my grandparents. Could you bring me your English notebook the day after tomorrow? I'll need it to catch up on missed assignments. I was slightly surprised by this sudden request. But since Dor had never caused me trouble and even done my homework a few times, I decided to help him and agreed. Thank you. Sorry to ask this, but I have to do my homework, he replied, still looking intently at me. When he said he had to do homework, there was something strange in his voice. As if he wasn't saying it of his own will, as if he were merely pretending to be a schoolboy. On the way home, I took out the note with the address and looked at it again. It had an address I had never heard of before. The handwriting was the strangest I had ever seen. Not at all like the way Dor usually wrote at school or in homework. Under the address, there was a neatly drawn small map. Thanks to it, I understood where his house was. I examined this map for a long time. Though it was clearly drawn by a child, it looked very orderly, almost topographical. As he said, he really wasn't at school on Thursday, which all the teachers immediately noticed. The whole class immediately filled with rumors. Although I tried to calm everyone by saying that such a day had to come sooner or later. Even a nerd like him had to miss school at least once. But when Friday came, Dor was still absent, though he said he would miss only Thursday. Then I decided to go to the address he had left me and deliver the notebook as promised. A few minutes passed as I wandered around, trying to figure out how he could live in such a place. The area was completely devoid of houses or residential buildings. Only here and there did you see factory buildings, small car repair shops, and workshops. And then I found myself in front of something that looked like an unfinished house. A square concrete block with some strange pipes sticking out of the side. It resembled a rough drawing of a house, drawn by a preschooler and brought into reality. Even the windows were large and square, and the door was flat, with no nameplate or number, just a round handle. I hesitantly knocked, thinking that maybe his parents were just renovating. A moment later, Dor himself opened the door. He looked different, and it threw me off balance. I must have looked clearly worried because the boy looked at me with a strange alertness. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I couldn't be at school today. My parents want me to stay home. I'm sick." His face was all red and covered with pimples. His lips were dry and cracked. With concern, I noticed that his legs were bent strangely, as if his knees didn't work properly. "Do you have the notebook?" he asked coldly. "Yes. Of course," I replied hesitantly and handed it to him. "Thank you." He interrupted himself abruptly as he reached for the notebook. Behind him there was a sound, something between a knock and a screech. I had never heard anything like it before. It was quiet. I probably wouldn't have noticed it if not for Dor's reaction. He seemed scared, and for the first time, I saw such strong emotions in him. He sharply turned and stared deep into the house. I peeked behind his back and noticed that the whole house was filled with strange objects. Some small, some large. Some resembled chairs, others tables. All of them were smooth, made of some plastic, and completely black. Modern decor, I thought. Why don't I see his parents? Then I remembered them. My mother, returning once from a parent meeting after scolding me for bad math grades, had told me about them. They were like him. They looked strange, spoke with a funny accent, and dressed as if they had never seen other people before. At that moment, as if clicking into my thoughts, Dor's father came out from behind the door. He was terrifyingly tall, probably nearly 2 meters, and looked at me as if I were an intruder. His face twisted into such a tense, hateful grimace that I still find it hard to believe that a normal person could make such a grotesque and exaggerated expression. But noticing my confusion, he instantly changed his expression to soft, as if someone had switched a setting. His behavior was mechanical, like a robot. While I stood there embarrassed, not knowing what to say, he said, "You're Dor's friend from school?" "Yes," I replied in the same strange tone and accent as Dor, only much more natural and less stiff. "Glad to see you." Yes, I replied, confused. "Dor is very sick. He should be lying in bed. We would have invited you inside, but you might catch it." The way he said catch it was so abnormal that I nearly fainted from fright. It's hard to describe. It was as if his vocal cords suddenly dropped several tones lower and produced a deep, thick gurgle, barely imitating human speech. I just nodded and quickly said goodbye. I don't even remember what I said exactly. All my attention was focused solely on getting home as fast as possible. Back home, I told my mom that I had visited Dor to deliver his notebook. "Did you see his father?" she asked with interest. "Yes, what a terribly tall man, right?" "Yeah, really," I replied. "He's strange." "Why?" "You know, you shouldn't judge people by appearance." "It's not that," I said, still slightly shaken. "Son, did something happen? You look pale." "Nothing special. He just spoke strangely. Scared me a little." "Oh, they all have some weird accent," she replied. "Don't worry. In life, you'll meet even stranger people." That evening, I tossed and turned in bed. Images of sick Dor and his frightening father kept appearing in my mind. I dreamt I was inside their house, damp, full of those strange black objects resembling plastic furniture. I walked through the living room and reached some doors. Behind them, stairs led to a basement, and the dream would abruptly end. Door disappeared along with my notebook. He wasn't even at the end-of-year ceremony. According to rumors from parents, teachers, and students, he had suddenly left with his family. His parents didn't even inform the principal, as if they had simply vanished. All of this caused me deep unease. And even though summer holidays had begun, I passed all subjects, including dreaded math. I felt strange, anxious. Years passed, and gradually I forgot about Dor and his strange family. I finished school and was about to enter university when Martin, my old friend with whom I kept in touch, reminded me of that eccentric boy. "Remember that weirdo?" he asked once when we met in town. "Oh God!" I laughed. "Of course I remember. Remember I told you how his house looked? Madness. I remember, maybe he and his family were some kind of aliens." On one hand, I laughed imagining Dor's father removing a human mask and revealing his true face. But moments later, I remembered the address of his house. "Maybe we should go there?" I suggested. "We won't go inside. I just want you to see this strange house." "Of course," Martin replied. "I have plenty of time before classes." We walked confidently down that street. Though I had forgotten its name, I remembered the road perfectly. Again, the familiar area appeared, full of factories and workshops, and then that same strange house. It looked abandoned and neglected. The door was open and taped, the tape partially torn. Around it, where bushes and small trees had once grown, there was now only bare earth and piles of trash. "No wonder it's empty," Martin said after a pause. "Who'd want to live in such a ruin?" I picked up a piece of the torn tape. It was yellow and strangely flexible. I had never seen anything like it before, not then or ever after. The living room was completely empty and damp. Bare concrete walls gave the place a threatening look. It felt to Martin and me that we were in a truly dangerous place. "Let's get out of here," I whispered. "Someone might catch us." "Who would catch us?" Martin loudly replied. "Calm down, this is just a little recon. We can look around a bit." "Right." But when he glanced at the door on the other side of the room, my heart clenched in fear. "There's probably a basement," I muttered. "What?" Martin asked again. "How do you know?" "I don't know, but I don't want to go there." I lied. I didn't tell him about the dream. I wanted him to think I'd gone mad. While I stood frozen in fear, he moved forward and flung open a door that crashed to the floor with a bang. "Shit!" he exclaimed. "It wasn't even fixed." "I told you, let's go," I begged. "Calm down, I want to see what's down there. No one's been here for ages." "Maybe we'll find some old homeless guy," he laughed, beginning to descend the stairs into darkness. "Do you see anything?" he asked. "Nothing." "Find a switch." Feeling along the wall, I finally found a switch, and the entire basement filled with pale, cold light. Martin screamed, and I felt like I was losing my mind. Before our eyes on the floor lay 3 naked figures. 2 large, 1 small. They weren't human bodies, but incredibly realistic figures made of some plastic-like material. I rubbed my eyes in astonishment, and Martin was breathing in short gasps, almost hysterical. "What the hell is that?" he stammered. "Mannequins, I guess?" "That's them," I replied, not believing my eyes. "They're Dor's parents. They had no genitals. They were large, stiff, sexless dolls. Their faces were smeared with thick red-orange paint. In the corner of the basement lay 3 sets of clothes, neatly folded in squares. I recognized one immediately, a plaid shirt and trousers with a belt. Nearby lay my notebook, untouched for 12 years, covered in a thick layer of dust. We both ran outside, running for a long time until we reached the main street. My head was spinning. I didn't know what to do. "What was that?" gasped Martin. "I have no idea," I replied. "It's madness. No one will believe us. Why leave mannequins there? Some crazy family, I guess." A few days passed during which we tried to explain everything that had happened. They were just ordinary mannequins. Maybe Dor's father was some kind of artist, and it was his project or something. My notebook, probably left in a hurry, was left there along with this strange art installation. I know, it all sounds silly. It was easier to believe nonsense than face what we saw in that basement again. It all felt so sinister, so alien. Yes, they were just mannequins, nothing more. We decided. A month after that incident, at night, lying in bed, I felt a strange sensation, as if someone was watching me. I slowly approached the window. Drawing back the curtains, I saw Tor. He was now an adult. I recognized him by his haircut, his face, and my notebook, which he held tightly in his right hand. He was staring at me and I at him, as if in a trance. His face had the same uncanny grimace as his father's. When the father suddenly stepped out the door, I again heard that sound, something between a knock and a screech. Door stepped forward to the window, then a second, a third. He approached slowly, and I stood frozen, paralyzed with panic. I woke up in a sweat. It was just a nightmare, a stupid, cursed nightmare. I felt relief, took a shower, had breakfast, and sat at my computer. I was about to write another page of my thesis when I noticed something outside the window. In the mailbox, there was a letter. I got up from the computer and took it. Thinking it was finally the book I had ordered from abroad, I opened the envelope without hesitation. Inside the old yellow envelope, without a stamp or address, was not a book. It was my notebook. Months had passed, and I was literally on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I didn't want any psychiatrists. I feared they would immediately lock me up. What could I tell them? That some supernatural lunatic, alien, demon, or God knows what was stalking me. In this stupor, one day I accidentally ran into the same big guy who had bothered Dor at school and then left in horror after what Dor said to him. He was now an adult, and I recognized him by the scar on his arm. I thought I might at least talk to him for my own peace of mind. He recognized me, even though we had never been friends. He immediately understood that I wanted to ask him about what he had heard from Dor, from this demon. With an expression of fear frozen on his face, he replied. He said my full name, address, the date of my move, my dad's name, mom's name, sister's name. He knew my phone number, my dog's name, my email password. Everything, he knew everything. And when he said it, his voice was, I don't know how to describe it. As if he stopped being a child, as if he suddenly changed. I looked at him tense, but Tor was not human. My worst nightmares turned out to be true. He was something, only pretending to be human. His parents too. They were not human. One more thing, he added. When he finished listing everything, he said that if I ever laid a hand on him, he would turn into the most terrifying thing I could ever see. And when he said this, please, believe me, I'm telling the truth, his eyes. Here he began to choke, completely overwhelmed by panic. His eyes, he continued with difficulty. They pierced me through. I know for sure, just as I am certain in my faith. Dor is somewhere out there, he exists.